The streets of Los Angeles were sun-kissed in the early hours of a Friday morning. The whole city screamed beauty as everyone made their way, hustling and bustling. Most of them were rushing to work, not taking time to bask in the beauty that was all around them. Amidst the city, the Elite Motors building stood proudly at the hive of the city. It was one of the buildings that received accolades for their building and also their business. The building was a stunning architectural piece that screamed luxury and sophistication. The structure was made of glass and polished steel, angling upward like a shard of glass, piercing the sky. The entrance was flanked with towering pillars, alongside a grand atrium. Stepping inside, the expansive showroom unfolded before one's eyes like a gallery of automotive art. The cars, of course, were the true stars of the show. They were arranged on elevated platforms, each one spotlit like a work of art in a museum. It was well known among people that only those who had a lot of money could afford to do anything there. Above the main floor, a mezzanine level overlooked the showroom, providing a bird's-eye view of the automotive splendor below. This was where the offices and private lounges were located, reserved for the most discerning clients and VIP guests. John Harris surveyed the showroom as he was replying various texts from some of their customers. He was the man of the game. That was why he could be the manager, and he knew it well. Most would call him handsome because of his sharp jawline and grey eyes. He watched as a dishevelled figure appeared at the entrance of the building, running past the security guards. Just a glance at the man who wore jeans, a faded t-shirt, and had unkempt hair made John irritated. This could be a potential threat to the company as a whole. "Can I help you?" John asked, raising his hand to halt the security guard from doing anything more. The man, whose gaze was all over the place, suddenly locked his eyes with John's for a second. His gaze dropped, and he mumbled, "Just looking. I see. Well, I'm afraid we don't allow browsing here. This is a high-end dealership, and our cars are for serious buyers only." The man's gaze flickered. "I'm looking for a Maserati. My brother has one." John raised an eyebrow. "A Maserati? I think you may be in the wrong place, friend." With a dismissive smile, John nodded to the security guard and turned to leave. But the man's next words stopped him cold. "Brother's got a Maserati. I need to find it." "Sorry, buddy. You're not going to find what you're looking for here. You're better off trying the bus station or a shelter." The man let out a shout, pointing around. "I'd be quick, I promise." Several stares went their way, causing John to move closer to the man. "Look, buddy, there are two ways in which this would go. You can either leave quietly, or I'd make your life miserable here and now. I just need a Maserati." John's hand grasped the man's arm, his fingers digging deep into the man's arms like talons. "You're not welcome here," he sneered. The man's eyes widened, as if pleading for him to answer him. John's gaze remained cold, unyielding. With a firm grip, John dragged the man toward the entrance, ignoring his stumbling feet. The man's protests were muffled, looking around at the multiple gazes that were struck at him. Sarah Mitchell's words were halted by the scene that was unfolding. She gave her client a small smile, apologizing for the distraction. The deal was closed, so all she had to do was to sort it out with her manager, who was causing a scene. Hastening her steps to the entrance, she watched as John shoved the man out of the building, and she couldn't help the way she felt uneasy. "Sir, that was harsh." She placed her hand on his arm. "He seemed harmless." John's gaze snapped toward her as his eyes flashed anger. "Mind your own business, Sarah. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when we treat people like that. He was just looking for something." He scoffed, taking a look at her again as if she was out of her mind. He was looking for a handout. "We're not a charity, Sarah. We're a business. We're a business that relies on people, on relationships. Treating someone with kindness doesn't hurt our reputation. It enhances it. John's face reddened, biting his lower lip. You're not going to lecture me on compassion, Sarah. Take a good look at this man and tell me if he looks like a potential client. I know what it takes to succeed. And if you keep sticking your nose in where it doesn't belong, I'll make sure your sales commissions suffer. Cut them in half, if need be. She smiled, watching as John waited for a response from her. A response that he knew she wouldn't give. It was after he was sure that she wouldn't say more that he walked back into the building, muttering under his breath. Situations like this angered her to the core because she knew what it felt like to be discarded and not heard. As she looked around, she couldn't find the man anymore. I could swear that he was just standing here. Miss Mitchell, the boss wouldn't like to see you out here. One of the security guards by her side whispered to her ears. Sarah merely turned to the security guard, smiling at what he had just said. Well, he wouldn't even notice. Her feet shuffled their way further out of the building, closer to the open gates. Yet she couldn't sight him again, and it felt like she had lost something all of a sudden. Maserati is beautiful. She recognized the voice immediately, turned and headed towards the parking lot. The parking lot was occupied by various cars of different sizes, ranging from the least expensive to the most expensive. She was sure that she heard the voice of the man, but she couldn't find him anymore. Her eyes scanned the area subtly, not wanting to call the attention of the manager, John. Her eyes finally landed on a familiar figure at the far end of the parking lot. The man was sitting on a bench with another security guard standing over him, but she could see that his eyes were on the cars, not on what the security guard was saying. She tapped the security guard's hand lightly. I'd take it from here. There was relief written over the security guard's face at her words. Hi, she said softly, introducing herself as soon as the security guard was out of earshot. I'm Sarah. I saw what happened earlier. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. The man's eyes flickered towards her just for a few seconds before returning to the cars. I'm David. He gazed lovingly at the cars. And I'm fine. Just looking for something. Sarah noticed that he wasn't really paying attention to her, as his focus fixed on the vehicles. She followed his gaze and saw that he was staring at a Maserati with a smile on his face. It's a beautiful car, isn't it? She took a glance at him, wondering how he looked so tattered, yet composed. David's smile widened at her statement, and for the first time, he gave her his full attention. Brother's got a Maserati, he muttered. Your brother owns a Maserati? She asked as she took a seat beside him, trying to understand. Sarah's heart went out to David, and she wanted to help him. I can show you the Maserati, she said, gesturing towards the back of the dealership. We have a few of the latest models in stock. His eyes lit up, and he followed her eagerly. As they walked towards the rear parking lot, she looked around, hoping that John was nowhere in sight. She wasn't supposed to be doing this, but she just had to. It was like showing a child new toys. It was clear that David seemed to be having some difficulty physically because of the way he repeated words over and over. The private lot was only accessible to specific staffs who had a unique ID, so there were no security officers nearby. If there were, she would have to explain why she was bringing in a man who looked homeless into such place. As they got in, she watched as his eyes looked like they would pop out of their sockets. This is one of our latest models. She finally stopped before one of the vehicles. Isn't it beautiful? David's eyes locked onto the car, having the same smile he had on since she had seen him. He reached out a hand, hesitated, then gently touched the car's surface, as if connecting with it. Sarah, what do you think you're doing? John stormed towards them. You're not supposed to be showing him around. I'm just showing him the Maserati, John. It's no big deal. He just wants to see it, and he will be gone. John's face turned red with anger. You're making a huge mistake, Sarah. This guy is a vagrant. He doesn't belong here. David's eyes dropped, and he took a step back, as if John's words had physically hurt him. John, that's enough. She moved in between both men, creating a cover for David. He's a human being, and he deserves respect. John sneered at her. When you were hired, I thought you had great potentials of becoming bigger and better, but I was clearly wrong. You're not thinking about the business. You're fired. Effective immediately. You can't fire me for showing compassion. What if he is your family member? Would you treat him this way? John moved closer to her, that their bodies were almost touching. Watch me. You're done. Get out of here, and don't come back. He began to move away from them when he turned again. I'd make sure you don't get any reasonable job anywhere. Nobody messes with my authority and gets away with it. As the security officers escorted them out of the private lot, Sarah turned to David. Wait for me outside. I'll just grab my things. David nodded, his eyes still fixed on the Maserati, as if reluctant to leave its presence. She hurried inside, thinking about how she would survive after. The job was one of her answered prayers, and she never imagined that she would lose it over a small issue. John's threat seemed to ring in her head over and over again, but she waved it aside. Looks like someone's got a soft spot for vagrants, she heard someone say behind her. Guess that's what happens when you're too compassionate for your own good. This would surely teach her a lesson. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she refused to give anyone the satisfaction of a reaction. She gathered her things and walked out the door, her head held high. Outside, David was waiting for her, his eyes scanning the area as if searching for something or someone. Ready to go? Sarah asked, trying to sound casual despite the turmoil inside. Thanks for showing me the car, Sarah. It meant a lot to me. Sarah smiled. Any time, David. Let's get out of here. All she wanted at that point was to be away from there and to cry her heart out. Not in the presence of David, though. That reminded her that the man whose hands she was holding wasn't someone she knew. Yet she fought for him, lost her job for him, and was now thinking of where to take him to. How do we get to your place, David? Or do you have someone's number that I can call? She waited patiently as they walked down the street. Brother's got a Maserati. Sighing deep, she was totally in for it. David, I want to help you. They were both seated at an ice cream shop an hour later. But I need to know where to find you. Can you tell me your address? David, who was completely taken by the chocolate ice cream she got for him, paid no attention to her. His eyes kept on darting around the ice cream shop, as if he was searching for an escape route. Please, David, she started saying again. I promise I'll keep it confidential. I just want to help you get back home. His gaze returned to hers, and he seemed to study her face, as if searching for any sign of deception. After a long moment, he finally spoke. 1423 Oak Street, his eyes dropping as if ashamed. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She knew that address. It was in a rough neighborhood, one that was often associated with crime. Thank you, David. I'd get you home safe. Few minutes later, they boarded a cab. It was already a long day for her, but she knew she had to do this. If he was staying alone, it wasn't safe at all for him to be living in such an area. Not long after, as they arrived at the address, she was shocked. The small house was weathered, with peeling paint and a patchy lawn. It looked like it had seen better days. David, are you sure this is the right address? Sarah asked, holding him tight as they waited outside the house. Before David could respond, a woman burst out of the house, tears streaming down her face. David! Oh, David! she exclaimed, rushing towards him. Sarah's eyes fixed on the woman, who was wearing a worn apron and had a look of relief on her face. The woman embraced David, holding him tightly as if she'd never let him go. It wasn't until David pulled away from the hug that the woman noticed Sarah, who was watching them. "I'm so sorry, please come in for a moment." Sarah was about to decline the invitation when she saw the pitiful look on the woman's face, and that changed her mind. As she entered, her eyes adjusted to the poor lighting of the sitting room as she allowed her eyes to wander. She noticed that the woman had a bit of a limp when she walked, making her a bit slower than she would have been. "I'm so sorry about David. He has been gone since morning when I was attending to a call." The woman gave Sarah a cup of water, giving her son a look. "Go wash up this instant. I'm Rachel Wilson, David's mother," she continued when he was out of earshot. "I'm sorry I don't have much now. I'd have made something better for you." Sarah smiled. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. You don't have to apologise. He came over to our dealership earlier today and was adamant about getting a Maserati. The manager wasn't hearing a word of it, which made me step in. One thing led to another, causing me to lose my job." Rachel's expression went from pitiful to shock. "Oh my goodness! I'm so sorry. How can I—" "It's all right, Mom. I would have left anyway. The whole attitude from the manager in charge was killing me already. This was just an easy way out." She took a sip of water, feeling thirsty. "I only have a question. Why does David want a Maserati?" Rachel wiped her hands on her apron, trying to smile. "Few years ago, David got a bit aggressive for a while and nothing could calm him down. Not my words, or his comic books. The only thing that got to him were cars. So after he got all worked up one day, it just slipped from me that his brother has a Maserati. That worked faster than anything I tried prior to that." "Oh, he has a brother?" Rachel heaved a sigh, looking distant all of a sudden. "You see, David was born with several health problems, and his father left us when he was just a baby. I was left to care for him on my own, and it was a daunting task. When Lance, his brother, was born a year later, I thought I had found a new sense of purpose. But David's needs were so great, and I had to make a heartbreaking decision." Her voice cracked as she struggled to continue. "I made the decision to put Lance up for adoption. I knew it was the only way to ensure he had a chance at a healthy and happy life, as I simply didn't have the resources or energy to care for both boys. It was a painful choice, but I thought it was the right one at the time." Sarah felt her eyelids become heavy as she watched Rachel wipe her tears, unashamed. It was not an easy decision for any mother to take. Rachel took a deep breath and continued. David's mental health issues started to manifest as he got older. He struggled with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. I've been his primary caregiver all these years, and it's been a challenge, but I love him with all my heart, and I want to help him get better. However, it looks like all my efforts are useless. This disease keeps on eating deep." "Disease? Is it something mild? We could get treatment for it." "I wish it was mild, Sarah. If I were to get treatment now, I'd be using the little I've kept for his medications. All I wish is that he gets better." She reached out and gently took Rachel's hand in hers, holding it across the table. "Mom, I'm so sorry you've had to go through this." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're an amazing mother, and your love for David is amazing. Everything will get better. Please just call me Rachel." She held Sarah's hand tighter. It was until Sarah got home that she crashed to the floor in tears. She cried for the job she lost, for Rachel, for David, and the whole situation. Her tears came without restriction and second thoughts. When she struggled to get up from the floor, she went straight to the refrigerator, took out the big cup of ice cream, and put on the television to watch a comedy series. That was the only thing that could relieve her a bit. The sound of broken bottles being crushed woke her up the next morning. It was the only thing that managed to get her up most times, unlike nature sounds. Turning over to her side, she gasped. She was late for work. If she was to get there at a manageable time, things had to move fast. Jumping out of the bed, she rushed to the bathroom, her feet barely reaching the floor. It wasn't until she reached for her towel that she hesitated. Something felt off. It was then that it hit her. The flashbacks of yesterday, David and Rachel, and the tears that followed. She didn't have a job to go to anymore. The whole thing seemed like a joke to her. Letting off a sigh, she made her way back to her bed and slid in back, taking her phone along with her. Now that she had no job, the next thing would have been for her to get another decent job to keep her on her feet, but she wasn't just interested in any of those yet. As she scrolled through her messages, her mind wandered to Rachel. The house wasn't all in a good shape. Neither did it look like they had a lot of groceries, given the amount of food stamps that she had seen. The woman was carrying a lot of load already. Combined with caring for her son and with what she could see, they were struggling to stay afloat. Rachel didn't reveal much on her sickness, but she couldn't tell it has limited her in many ways. Only if she could do something. Sarah clicked her fingers at that and jumped out of bed again. She had work to do. Few days later, Sarah stood before Rachel's house carrying 2 big bags. Silently praying in her heart, she hoped that Rachel wasn't out of the house at the time. She took hurried steps to the door, despite the heavy load, and knocked twice. The door was opened after a few seconds, revealing a wide-eyed Rachel, who was shocked to find Sarah standing on her porch. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" she stuttered, as her eyes went straight to the bag she was carrying. "Hi, I'm sorry for just coming here out of the blue. It didn't pass through my mind to exchange numbers." "Well, I just decided to bring these over." She held the bags up high. "Sarah." Rachel's voice trailed off as Sarah brushed past her, entering the house. "Ugh, my hands are hurting a bit." She made her way to the kitchen before Rachel could say anything else. "Oh, hi, David. What are you up to?" "Just watching a car race." David, who sat on the floor, didn't glance at her as his eyes were fixed on what he was watching. She went on to the kitchen and began unpacking the groceries on the counter. Rachel trailed after her, looking as if she had seen a ghost. "My goodness, Sarah." She put her hand over her mouth, not getting over what she was seeing. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. All I want from you now is to go to the sitting room and watch the car race with David. When I'm done here, I'll let you know." Rachel's legs were stuck to the ground watching Sarah arrange everything. It wasn't until she sat with David that she felt tears threatening to fall. A week and a half had passed since Sarah's second visit, and Rachel was starting to get used to it, but not completely. This time, Sarah showed up with an apron in hand, alongside groceries and board games. Rachel watched in amazement as Sarah effortlessly whipped up a hearty meal, like she did the last time she was there. Soon she began to lose count of the times she had come to her place, and even David warmed up to Sarah more. One day, as they sat down to eat, Rachel's curiosity finally got the better of her. "Sarah, I have to ask, why are you doing all of this for us? You barely know us, and yet you're treating us like family." Sarah's hands paused mid-air, giving her a quick glance. "I know it sounds strange, but I just feel drawn to you both. I can't explain it, but I just feel like being here all the time. You both make it easy. But why? We're not exactly needy. And you have your own life. You should be hunting for a job." Sarah's smile was gentle as she placed her spoon lightly on the dish plate. "I know, and I've put in an application for some jobs now, but sometimes you just know when something feels right. And this feels right. You and David, just give me that thing and I want to help." "Thanks, Sarah. You're really kind." David, who had been quietly observing the exchange, spoke up, smiling. "It's nothing, sweetie. I'm just glad I can help." As they continued to eat, Rachel found herself feeling more comfortable about Sarah being around. Maybe it was the way she moved with such quiet confidence, or the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about books. Whatever it was, she felt at peace with it. When Sarah left their place hours later, she thought about what Rachel had asked her and realised that she had never really given it some thought. It just felt like it was what she was created to do for her and her son. Clive Owen strolled outside one of his various dealerships as he watched the premises. This was something that he had built from scratch, so from time to time he would go on random visits when he had the time. As he walked past the garbage can, something familiar caught his eye. Moving closer to it, he bent to pick up what seemed to be a badge that his staff used. As he examined it, Sarah Mitchell was boldly written on it. This wasn't what he meant to do, but it would be okay to confirm. Walking into the dealership, he felt eyes stuck on him, just in that short moment. "Good day, sir. How may I help you? Do I need to—" Clive stretched his hand forward, giving the man before him a full view of the badge. "Where is Sarah Mitchell? I found her badge lying by the garbage can." "I'm afraid Sarah Mitchell no longer works here, sir," he stammered, avoiding Clive's eyes. Clive's eyes narrowed. "Why?" The young man glanced around nervously before leaning in. "I don't know the details, sir, but the manager might be able to explain." "Go get him then. Tell him I'd be in the office." It didn't take more than that to get John rushing to Clive's office. When he arrived there, Clive could sense a hint of unease from him. John's eyes darted back and forth, as if searching for an escape route, before finally settling on Clive's face. "So I hear that one of the staff no longer works here. I found her badge around the garbage can. What happened?" John nodded, eager to speak all of a sudden. "She wasn't adhering to the rules that have been set. I tried to correct her, but she proved much more stubborn. It was a sacrifice that I made for this company." "Sacrifice? Tell me, what was she like working here?" John hesitated, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for inspiration. Sarah, she was a good worker, sir. Always on time, friendly with the customers. But what, John?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "But she had a bit of a reputation, sir. Some of the other employees found her a bit odd." "Would you get straight to the point this minute? I might as well start to doze off." Clive sighed wearily. "I'm sorry, sir. The thing was that Sarah Mitchell took a vagrant to the private area, somewhere that you clearly instructed me to keep off to other staff. This was the same time that she was supposed to be attending to one of VIP clients, but she completely ignored me. That isn't the kind of person we need here." Clive leaned back, trying to understand why a high-standing staff would do such. "You may go. I'll call if I need anything from you again." He knew that there was something that John wasn't telling him, and there was only one way to find out. Less than 5 minutes later, he was seated in the surveillance room, waiting for the surveillance footage to be provided. Clive moved closer to the monitor, watching as everything was unfolding. The grainy video showed John's condescending attitude towards the man, causing Clive's blood to boil. The footage showed how Sarah had handled the situation calmly, in spite of what John did. It was then that his eyes caught something that he felt was familiar. "Can you zoom in?" he asked, still watching the footage. The man's shirt seemed to glow in the sunlight. "Property of—" His voice trailed off, unable to remember where he had seen it. The more he looked at the footage, the more he became convinced that John used flimsy excuses to cover up his sinister self. Returning back to his office, he sent for John, who dashed back to his office. Clive's eyes skewered him like a bug on a pin. "Don't lie to me, John. I've seen the footage. I know what really happened." John took a step back, opening his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He knew he had been caught red-handed, and he had to come up with a plausible excuse. I was just trying to protect the dealership's reputation, sir. John was visibly trembling now that he had been caught. By humiliating a man who was clearly in distress? By treating him like a piece of trash? John's face paled as Clive's words cut through his defences. He knew he had crossed a line, and now he was facing the consequences. I didn't mean to, sir, John whispered, unable to look at Clive. His gaze bore into John, wondering if the man was in the least remorseful. Get out, John. Clive rose to his feet. You're fired. Clive knew that he had to go apologise to the staff that was treated wrongly. He couldn't stop replaying the footage in his head as he walked back to this car, which was just behind the dealership. Now that he had seen the footage, he felt like there was something more to how Sarah helped the man. All he had to do was to find out. He had barely turned on the ignition when he saw his secretary's name flash on his phone. Pressing a button, her voice came through. Good afternoon, sir. I've been trying to reach you for about an hour now. Please don't forget about your meeting with the marketing team at 2 p.m. They are waiting for you at the downtown office. He nodded as she spoke, turning on the ignition. Got it. Thanks for the reminder, Dee. Fortunately, he was close to the downtown office, which meant that he could still beat time. There wasn't much that he could do all alone, which was why he needed a good team, especially when there were new products to be brought to the table. On getting to the office, he was met with a variety of expressions from the marketing team. Spill it. The head of the team looked around as if confirming from her members. Well, there was a little mishap that happened today, and it could have been avoided if something was done earlier. Clive made his way to the chair at the opposite end of the table, tapping his fingers on his lap as he went. The products that were supposed to be brought out to the public have some issues, and we would need time to rectify the issue. A young man by the team leader let out a grunt. A total of 20 heads turned to see what was going on with him. No one should give me that look when you know fully that we all told her to tell him earlier. If that was done, all this explanation wouldn't be... Jason, the woman shrieked, alarming Clive, who was now very worried about the team that was supposed to give good PR for the company. Anita! Clive waited until she tore her menacing gaze away from Jason before he continued. It is glaring that there is an issue within your team and you haven't rectified it yet. Anita looked sideways, biting her lower lip. It isn't what it looks like, sir. Even a blind man would be able to detect. He rose to his feet immediately. I just want to know one thing. Would you be able to work on your team and every other issue as soon as possible, or should I just get another team? You of all people know that I don't have time on my hands. We will fix everything. I'm so sorry about all this. She moved quickly to his side as he walked out of the office, desperately wanting some peace and quiet. He got into his car while she stood outside, still apologising. Tapping the first number on his call log, he shook his head. I need you to help bring another marketing team together. It looks like they aren't competent enough. And please get them new air conditioners. He wrapped his requests to his assistant before cutting the call. The rest of the day was filled with other events for him. After he left the office of the marketing team, he went straight to another meeting, then to another. By evening, when he was done with everything, he was both tired and famished. As he was waiting for the traffic light to turn green, he glanced casually at his phone and remembered that he wanted to call Sarah Mitchell. The light turned green and the car surged forward. He activated his phone's voice assistant. Hey, dial Sarah Mitchell's number. The phone dialed automatically, and he waited for her to pick up. It rang twice before she picked up. Hello? She panted, sounding out of breath. Hi, is this Sarah Mitchell? Yes, it is. Hi, Sarah. I was wondering if you're free to meet up and discuss something. A beat passed and he could only hear her breathing. Sorry, but who's this? I don't have this number. I'm so sorry for not introducing myself. I'm Clive, a PR manager independently hired by the dealership. Something crashed at her side, and he heard her sigh. Oh, I never knew that even existed. So how may I help you? I wanted to talk to you about the incident that happened at the dealership where you used to work, he asked, as he looked out the window, looking for somewhere to get a quick dinner. I don't know if that's important. I guess you can just get your facts from the manager or something. Please, I'm kind of busy right now. Clive ran his hand through his hair. I believe it's best to hear from both sides when it comes to situations like this. When will you be free then? There was a brief pause on her end, and he thought she had ended the call. Tomorrow afternoon at Dino's Diner. Let's say around noon. Thank you so much. I'll be there. Feeling satisfied, he did a little victory dance. He almost thought that she was going to refuse seeing him. All he wanted now was good food. Just as he was driving, he sighted a restaurant and quickly swerved to the side. What would you like to get, sir? A waitress walked up to him as soon as he was seated. Just give me the best, please. The next day came by quickly, and Clive was all ready for it. Dino's Diner was a popular place that sold nice and decent food, and they were well known for their ice cream. It had a family feel to it, due to the fact that a portion of the room was divided into booths. As he walked into the diner, he was amazed at the amount of people that were in the diner, despite it being noon. Just as he was about to dial Sarah's number, he sighted her in one of the booths, engrossed with her phone. With a smile on his face, he headed towards her. Mind if I join you? He asked, startling her. I'm the guy that called you yesterday, Clive. It was then that she broke into a smile. Oh, hi. Please, you are free to sit. She gestured to the empty space across from her. Would you like to get something before we start? Sarah shook her head, setting her phone aside. Believe it or not, I just finished a jumbo-sized cone before you came. If I take another scoop of ice cream, my stomach might burst wide open. Well, we don't want that to happen. He placed his hand on his chest, laughing heartily. I don't want to take much of your time, Sarah. I'd just get straight to the point, Clive started, turning all professional immediately. Sarah nodded, anticipating what he was going to say. So tell me about your experience working at the dealership. What was it like? Sarah smiled at his question as she thought about it again. Well, I worked there for about 3 years, starting as a receptionist and then moving to sales. I have to say, it was a great experience. I learned so much about the industry and the people in it. That's impressive. I've been working with the dealership for a while now, and I must say it's all good. Did you have any fallout with any of your co-workers? Rarely, and that was because we understood what we were employed to do. Clive smiled, thinking of the best way to chip in the main thing that he wanted. You must have been a valuable asset to the team. I'm surprised they let you go. The thing is, it's something that just happened, and I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing now. I have to ask, Clive said, leaning in. What happened that day with the man? You know, the one who came in looking for a car. He came in asking for a Maserati, not to buy one, but just to see it. I take it that he didn't look so good physically, but that wasn't supposed to be used against him. The manager threw the man out, saying that he was a vagrant and all. All I wanted was to make the young man feel safe. My way of doing that wasn't quite right, but I just felt like it was okay. He nodded, looking at the people around them. But why did you help? The world has become too much about who you are and how much money you have, she started to say. That poor man was just looking for a particular car. He wanted to look at it, dream about it, maybe even pretend it was his for a moment. Of course, he couldn't buy it, but that didn't matter. Clive listened intently, struck by how she composed herself. You have a remarkable way of seeing people. Sarah smiled, realizing that she had expressed herself more. I just think we've lost sight of what truly matters. We get so caught up in our own lives, our own problems, that we forget to be human. You are right, Sarah, this man. I hope he's all right. Who exactly is he? Sarah's phone chimed just at that time. If you really want to know more, I can take you to his house. Besides, it would help you get a clearer understanding of the situation. She scrolled through her phone, gradually getting engrossed. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. You know where he lives? He asked, tapping the table with his fingers. Sarah nodded, her smile growing wider. Yes, I do. Can we go now? Sarah shrugged, wondering why he was so happy all of a sudden. Why not? She watched as Clive rose up gingerly, telling her that he was going to bring the car over. There was something she couldn't detect when it came to him. Ever since he had called her the previous day, she wasn't so settled about the whole issue. At first, she had thought that was just someone playing pranks and all. Then later on, she thought he was a scam. She was happy that everything turned out fine. She made her way to the entrance of the diner, following Clive, who seemed to be in a hurry. A few moments later, a sleek sedan pulled up, and Sarah looked at Clive in surprise. Wow, you travel in style. The company provided it for the time being, he explained casually, opening the door for her. Sarah merely shrugged it off. As Clive drove, he felt a bit curious, not knowing what to expect. He glanced over at Sarah, who was intently taking in nature from the window. She was an amazing person, and he hoped that she knew that. Is it okay that we are going empty-handed? Why don't we get something for him? He asked, glancing at her. That's all right. We can just stop at a store to get whatever. I guess we should make a stop at the next one. A stop was made, and 20 minutes later, Sarah and Clive stood at the porch of Rachel's house as Clive carried the groceries. His mother is such a strong woman, believe me. Sarah whispered into his ears as she rang the bell, waiting for her to answer the door. Oh my, Sarah, I thought you said you had something to do today. Rachel stepped out to hug Sarah. You should have let me know. I'd have made your favourite. I'm sorry for coming like this with a visitor. Something actually came up. It's at Sarah's mention of a visitor that Rachel glanced behind her. Clive merely bowed slightly in greeting, smiling at the woman. Rachel took a step back, still staring at Clive. He almost checked his appearance to see if something was wrong. Forgive my manners. Come on in. Sarah nodded, stepping aside for Clive to pass. I'm sorry again. He's actually an independently hired PR manager by my former workplace. All he wants to do is to ask a couple of questions and check in on David. Are you sure that he's really a PR manager? Rachel had to ask Sarah, who was already shaking her head. I'm sure. Clive was already in the sitting room, dropping the things that they got on the floor by his chair. The sitting room was divided by a bookshelf that didn't have any books on it. He saw a photo book and decided to just look through it. As he flipped through the photo book, he saw a picture that seemed familiar. Would you like water or orange juice? Rachel suddenly appeared before him, smiling, and looked concerned when she saw that he wasn't smiling. But Clive wasn't smiling at all. Why do you have a childhood picture of me, Mom? He watched as her expression turned sour, and he couldn't help the sinking feeling he felt in his stomach. It felt like everything around him was now in black and white. I promise that I can explain, Lance. Rachel looked as if she would fall down any minute with the way her face was pale. Clive rubbed his hands together. Lance? I just called for pizza and it should be here. Sarah's voice trailed off when she saw the looks on their faces. What's going on? You are my mother, aren't you? The only person who would have been able to protect me, yet you abandoned me? He ran his hands through his hair, leaving the photo book on his lap. Rachel burst into tears that minute, falling to the ground, but Clive didn't care. How could you do that to me? How could you just leave me? It was so hard to not run crazy when I realised that I was adopted. I looked nothing like them, and no one would say a word even when I asked. Clive, just calm down. Sarah rushed to his side, putting her hands on his face. Let's just sit and talk everything over. So you knew? And you didn't say a thing when you saw me? Yet you made me drive here, knowing that she's my mother. I didn't know that you were her son. How could I have known, Clive? Rachel moved closer to the duo, touching Clive's feet, but he angrily stood up, moving away from her reach. I just need to get some air, because my thinking gears aren't exactly the way they should be now. Mum, isn't this brother, the one who has a Maserati? Mum? 3 pairs of eyes hit David, whose clothes were dripping water. Clive flashed a glance at Rachel, then back at David, and it was then he remembered what the shirt meant. Seeing that he was now the centre of attention, he rushed out of the room, causing Sarah and Rachel to run after him. Clive, please come back, I can explain. Sarah rushed to his side as he entered the car. It isn't what you think, Clive. Just come in, and you'll see. What do you mean by that? I'm sure you've never been abandoned in your life. He noticed that he hit a nerve there. Nice, Clive. But I take it that it's the hurt speaking. Before you storm off, Rachel had to give you up for adoption because she wanted you to have a better life. Her husband, your father, ran away from home, leaving her with 2 young boys who she was ready to give the world to. But David's health was getting worse, and slowly it was affecting you. So she had to do it. Just think of how hard it was of her. Clive let out a muffled scream, startling Sarah, then he stormed off. It was Rachel's sobbing that made her return to the porch. I'm sorry, Rachel, I didn't know that he was the one. I should have done my research before I met him too. I'm sorry. She held Rachel tight as she continued to sob. Can I get a hug too? David emerged out of the house, stretching his hands, and when Sarah nodded, he hugged them, making them wet in the process. Clive was clearly struggling to come to terms with what had happened. Sarah's words continued ringing in his head. An hour later, he found himself back to the same spot he parked earlier. All he wanted was the truth. When he knocked, it was Sarah who came over to open it. She said no words to him and opened the door wider for him. He didn't mean to speak that way to her. Sarah, she looked at him. You should settle family issues first. Rachel was in the sitting room, staring into space. I need to hear the truth from you. She turned to face him. David had a complicated birth, resulting in his health issues. It was at this point that your father had left us. I realized that I wasn't capable of giving you the life that you deserved. So I gave you up for adoption, but years later, David was always on my case about his brother, you. He would always gaze at that picture. So I told him that you owned a Maserati, making him develop his love for cars. I didn't want to let you go. Clive was silent, watching as the woman who was his mother couldn't hold her tears. It was hard knowing that I wouldn't be able to know my parents. He spread out his arms, and Rachel rushed into his embrace, crying. As they hugged each other tightly, Clive realized his mistake in judging his mother so harshly. She had made a difficult decision, ensuring his adoption by a well-off family. Who knows where he would be if he had stayed with her? Thank you, Mum, he whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance at a better life. David, thinking it was some hugging party, went straight to give his mother and brother a bear hug. Sarah sat down gently as she watched the trio hold themselves tight, not wanting to let go. Who would have thought that the man she had helped months ago was actually Clive's brother? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault that all this happened. Taking care of David isn't easy at all, and I understand that. I'm more glad that I've found my birth mother and my own brother. The family that adopted me didn't adopt any other child. Growing as an only child was pretty lonely and tough. But now I have an elder brother. Sarah started to clap, jumping to her feet. Is it just me, or does this not call for a celebration? A big one at that. Mum, go get dressed. I'd like to take you to a nice place to eat. The next hour found the four of them in one of the most expensive restaurants in Los Angeles. Tables were set with fine china and silverware that Sarah was scared to touch at first. Looking around, she realized that the whole restaurant was empty. Did you book the whole restaurant? She finally asked the question that was pounding in her head. You must be so rich. Would you rather I did not? Clive gave her a nudge on the shoulder, smiling. He has been smiling more than he has his whole life. The realization that he finally had his true family with him gave him peace and happiness. I want to give you the world, Mom. Everything you deserve. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears as she reached out to touch his hand. Forgiveness, Clive. That's all I need. That's all I've ever wanted. Clive stared at the woman who had birthed him, smiling again. She truly loved him from the bottom of her heart. It was a love that knew no doubts whatsoever. She knew who he was all this while, yet she didn't reach out to him when he needed help because it wasn't right for her to do so. Regardless of what had happened, he had plans for her and his elder brother. Never again would they suffer anything. As they ate, Clive couldn't help but steal glances at Sarah, his heart swelling with gratitude. He realized that she was the one who had brought them together, who had helped him find his way back to his family. Thanks to her, he was finally happy. For years he had accumulated wealth and was still unfulfilled. Money didn't guarantee his happiness one bit. He took a look at everyone on the table and his gaze finally landed on Sarah. This was it. The moment he had to reveal everything. All right, Sarah, Clive began, his voice steady but laced with sincerity. You deserve the truth. I'm not a PR manager. Sarah raised an eyebrow, her smirk widening. I figured as much. So what are you? Some big shot manager at another dealership? Clive chuckled softly. Not exactly. How about we take a little drive? I have something to show you. Intrigued, Sarah nodded. All right, let's see what you've got. They walked over to a sleek, midnight blue sports car that awaited them. Clive opened the passenger door for Sarah, who slid into the plush leather seat. As Clive settled into the driver's seat, Sarah looked around, impressed by the luxurious interior. Nice car, she remarked. Is this part of your big reveal? Clive grinned and started the engine. The car roared to life, and they sped off into the night, the city lights blurring past them. After a short drive, Clive pulled into the driveway of a sprawling mansion, its grandeur accentuated by the moonlight. Sarah's eyes widened. What is this place? Clive turned to her, his expression serious yet soft. This is my home, and I have a confession to make. I'm not just any employee at the dealership, Sarah. I'm the CEO of the company. Sarah's jaw dropped. You're kidding, right? Clive shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. No, I'm not. Sarah leaned back in her seat, her mind racing. Wow, I didn't see that coming. You really don't fit the stereotype of a CEO. Clive laughed, a warm, genuine sound. I get that a lot. Clive took Sarah's hand, looking into her eyes with an earnest intensity. Sarah, you've changed my life in ways I can't even begin to explain. You've helped me reconnect with my family, and you've shown me what's truly important. I know this might seem sudden, but I'd love to take you out on a proper date. What do you say? Sarah's heart raced. but she squeezed Clive's hand, her eyes shining with happiness. "I'd like that, Clive. I'd like that a lot." As the night went on, the four of them sat together, sharing stories and laughter. The chemistry between Clive and Sarah grew stronger, a connection forged through honesty and mutual respect. Clive knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they could face them together as a family. And so, under the soft glow of the chandelier, they embarked on a new journey, one filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities. They had found each other in the most unexpected of circumstances, and now they were ready to face the future hand in hand, living happily